Hey there, friends. Well, I've got a lot of pretty interesting data to share with you all today. In fact, I want to pass a little warning along to all of my racist friends out there who get really upset whenever I point out truth and facts. In fact, you'll see one of my newest t-shirts is made, designed, and put out there specifically for you because I want to help you help you. Gun control Democrat-run Washington, D.C. is witnessing a surge in murders that is putting it on pace to record its deadliest year in 2 decades. 3 homicides over the weekend brought the city's total for this year to 161, which represents a 28% increase over this same time last year. Now, real quick, shout out to my friend AWR Hawkins from Breitbart News for putting this story out there because I'm using a lot of the data from his very story. Jamila White chairs the Advisory Neighborhood Commission for the area in which the latest 3 murders occurred and claims city officials are not responding to the commission's suggestions on how to fix things. I reached out to this particular commission to ask them what their suggestions were to fix the things because obviously if they're wanting to limit ban guns that are already banned. In other words, if they're wanting to institute additional gun-related crimes, they're barking up the wrong tree, and no wonder people are ignoring them. Deep down inside, folks, everyone knows the true cause and the actual fixes of these particular areas. They just can't talk about it in the media, and that's what's going to piss some of my detractors off today because I've got some facts that will definitely prove y'all got some work to do in some of these neighborhoods. Now, the DCist reported on August 2nd that U.S. Attorney for D.C. Matthew Graves, a Biden appointee, assured the city's residents his office is working with police to focus on a small group of people who they believe are behind the killing and mayhem. Problem is, they can't really focus on them. They know who they are. It's 500 people that's committing most of the crimes and homicides, and I say crimes and homicides, it's a mixture. It's not just homicides. There's a lot of crime in D.C. right now. But it's this same group of people that's committing all of these crimes. And that's the problem. They can't really target them because what they'll do is, this is a Biden appointee, they're going to turn some of these people away from the voters that would just blindly vote for Biden under normal circumstances. So let's first take a look at DC's gun policies. Very strict. There is an extensive permitting and licensing requirement simply to own a gun in DC. To obtain a gun permit in DC, an individual must comply with thorough and stringent requirements such as establishing eligibility, proof of some training and familiarity, easy for you to say, with firearms and mental health clearances. Mental health clearances, right. Once someone legally possesses a weapon and that weapon is registered, there are then additional restrictions on where and how that weapon can be transported outside of the home, which is pretty insane. Now, what the wackos on the far left who are failing in this community and what the anti-gun people will say because they have all the guns that they lust after, or at least the gun laws that they lust after here in DC, what they'll say, because it's an abject failure in this area and none of the gun laws work in this area, this is proof that they don't work. What these people will tell you is, oh, well, it's not. The problem isn't a DC problem. The murders and the crime happens in DC, but the guns all come here from other areas. They're always going to blame adjoining areas, accompanying areas right outside of DC and they'll specifically target ones with less stringent gun laws so that they can say, if they had the same strict gun laws that we have, then everything would be fine. Their claim is always that if everybody else was punished like this one area, then all of our problems would be solved and this is a solution. Well, it's not, and that's always proven to be wrong. And in many cases, you're going to find that the crime is pretty isolated to DC. There's no major portal of importing guns into DC. These people are stealing guns left and right. They're using them. They are proliferating them throughout Washington, D.C., and it ain't some big bad boogeyman from outside the area that's got this magical pipeline into D.C., and nobody else can figure that out. They've identified the people that are the problem. They just won't do anything about it. Now, back to this U.S. attorney that says he's focused on these small group of people driving most of D.C.'s gun violence. I grabbed the report that these people were looking at in order to come to this conclusion so that I could share this data with you. This is a report that you will absolutely not see any mainstream media put out, talk about, reference, footnote, nothing. This report will never see the light of day. That's why I'm showing it to you, so you can see it and you can utilize it. And this report, it's not a, quote, right-wing or far-right extremist report. That's not what it is. The National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform in Washington, D.C. All run by, all appointed by, everything is far left-leaning liberals, and they still could not hide the truth and had to put it in this report. Again, this ain't an NRA report. This is not a Gun Owners of America report. This is not a Firearms Policy Coalition report. This ain't a Republican report. This is some far left-leaning wacko leftists that painstakingly had to put this together because they could not bury the truth anymore, and this is what it says. First, let's look at this slide. Victims and suspects of homicides and non-fatal shootings. I want you to see this real quick. Look at the bolded line in there. About 96% of victims and suspects in both homicides and non-fatal shootings were black. Now, this ain't an anti-black video. I know a lot of my detractors and a lot of my trolls in the comment section will be like, oh yeah, you had to dig for a long time to find that. No, I didn't. These figures are really easy to find and very easy to confirm. And again, your people are the ones who put this out. So I'm using y'all's data, not my data. So what this is telling me is, obviously they know where the problem is. Now, why is this not a black problem? This is a political problem. This is politicians encouraging and coaxing mothers to marry the federal government rather than the fathers of their babies. This is also the federal government encouraging, bribing, coaxing fathers into not fulfilling their obligation as a father to a baby, and they bail. These are predominantly single parent homes, and I would be willing to bet if you ran numbers on this, you're going to find well into the 90s that these are fatherless homes. The dads are not in these homes. Again, this, you can make this a race issue if you want to, because this happens to be a lot of black people involved, but make no mistake, it ain't skin color. This is the federal government enslaving a group of people that will not fight back and will not change their ways to fight back and let the government lead them around like they all have nose rings in their nose, like pigs back in the day. This is a group of people, and I don't care what color they are, because believe me, there's plenty of white people that are slaves to the government as well. But this is, in general, all the races involved, is a group of people who will not take the time to make a change in their own lives, and they fall down these roads right here, and it's always predictable. All of this is predictable. None of this is a surprise. It's been happening for decades, and it's only going to get worse. Look at my next slide here, table 1, and I want you to look at the column that says suspects. These are the people committing the crimes, and in most cases they are. I mean, oh, it's the suspects. I mean, until they're convicted, they're only suspects. Yeah, whatever. They're usually right whenever they say this. This is what I was telling you about earlier. If you notice your victims and suspects under the homicides, you've got your, and we're looking specifically at the male column right now, because obviously the female column is pretty insignificant. You've got your victims are 89% male, and your suspects are 95.8% male. So that's telling you that we have a very specific demographic in terms of the sex of these people, which it's kind of odd that you found an organization in DC that could actually this time identify actual males. I don't think there are any transgender males in that 89 or 95.8%. But this is definitely telling you that our victims and suspects are certainly in the male category. Now, you ready for some painful real talk here? Those are my detractors and those on the far left who always want to call me a racist, even though I prove my topics on the regular. This slide right here shows you what I was previously talking about. And you can see clearly that white people, Hispanics, Asians, and others are clearly not a problem. Look at the line of suspects, and you can see that these people are rarely ever an issue. This is, again, a report put out by left-leaning wackos. They don't want you to see this. They don't want you to see this breakdown, because this is a painful pill for them to swallow, and it points right back at themselves and shows that they're failures in their own communities and that they themselves have enslaved an entire race of people in a very small area, yet they blame everybody else, but it's them that's the problem. All of these black people in these neighborhoods should bounce, meaning vote every single one of these absolute failures out of office and get rid of them, because they are happy with these numbers right where they are and are not changing a damn thing about them. Now, this next one is going to cause some people to have the tops of their brains probably blow out the top of their head. So look at the first bolded column there. You got 26.8% of this group is 18 to 24, and then 38.7%. A lot of the happenings going on, and look at the next column if you want, or the next row if you want. It's under 34. So we've got the majority of these people under the age of 34. But look at the top line, 17 and under. These are the babies. These are the babies. These are the ones that whenever they say that guns are the number one killer of children, they redefine children to include up to 24-year-olds. Look at the first two columns we have right there, rows right there, 17 and under and 18 and 24. If we combine those two columns, just those two columns alone, alone looking at the suspects, we have over 49%, almost half of the group of suspects are considered to be, quote, children, according to the far left-leaning wackos. Now look at the victims over there. You want to talk about why their numbers are so high? Let's talk about that for a second. 34% of your victims are, quote, children between the ages 17 and 24. This is that group of record-setting deaths by guns for children. Now, I'm being sarcastic because these are clearly not children. The court does not see them as children, and nobody else sees them as children, except for our pencil pushers, the bean counters over here on the wackos on the far left side. They're wanting to include these numbers, to inflate their numbers, to go, oh, look at all the kids that are dying. If you are 21 years old, you ain't no kid, right? We all know that, and we all know these kids have to grow up really fast because they don't have fathers anyway. These kids are maturing quickly on the street. I would challenge anyone that would say a 17-year-old is not considered a grown man on the street whenever he's had to live his life on the street. And of course, these are not your normal mass shooters. The reason why is because they are repeat offenders. At least 64% of all victims and suspects had been under any prior or active supervision, and at least 76% of homicide suspects had active or prior supervision. Meaning, this ain't the guy who was bullied, over-medicated, raised in a broken home, like I write about in my book, who suddenly snapped and went out and lashed out at a bunch of people. These are people who do this routinely. These are career people. These are repeat offenders. These are not people that are flying under the radar and suddenly indiscriminately start shooting at people. That's why we can't put these in the same category. If you want to approach these both the same way and fix these both the same way, you're stupid and you're not paying attention to the actual numbers. Now here's the crimes they're committing. Overall, most victims and suspects with prior criminal offenses had been arrested about 11 times for about 13 different offenses by the time of the homicide. This count only refers to adult arrests, and juvenile arrests were not included. So this means that we definitely have our list of, quote, children under the age of 24 in these numbers. And you can see the list of crimes that they take part in. Again, these are not your prototypical mass shooters, quote, rampage killers that I like to call them, simply because these are repeat offenders. These are not people trying to disappear in society. These are people that are on everyone's radar and everyone knows who they are. And this slide actually impressed me. This is what I always try to get at whenever I talk about the differences in the two types of shootings. We talk about rampage killers, which again are people who grow up in a broken home, they're over-medicated, they're bullied, they lash out, they kill people indiscriminately, and they usually die in a suicide during that rampage killing, or the cops shoot them. That's a different person altogether. They are wired differently. They approach their murders differently. Then you have your conflict killers. These are conflict killers. And let me show you the difference between them. Clearly, your first several columns right there, personal dispute. I talk about that all the time. We talk about gang-related shootings and conflict shootings. This is what I'm talking about. These people know each other, they get in a personal dispute, they shoot at each other. Group-related conflict, that's your gang conflict. They simply just don't want to use the other four-letter G word because it might offend some people. So they call it group-related conflict, that's gang conflict. Instant dispute. Well, whatever. Instant dispute is no different. That's just, again, these are people who know each other. They see each other. They know that's the bad guy, and they pop off. Drug-related dispute, of course, robbery, domestic violence. Domestic violence is a little bit different. That one and the one I'm going to mention here in a second should not be in this column if we're wanting to identify groups that need to be focused on in order to fix that. That domestic violence is not the same in order to fix that if you're talking about conflict shootings or gang-related type shootings. That's a completely different subset of how we got here as far as who's going to pull the trigger and why they pulled the trigger. It's not the same reason, so we can't approach that the same way. So again, domestic violence, it's in here just to have you give you a list of the count, but it should not be in there if we're trying to approach the resolution of how to fix all this. Retaliation, revenge, yep, that rolls right into personal dispute, group-related conflict. It's just a different category. All of these are going to be like that. Drug robbery, yep, falls right in the same category. Mental illness, that's the next one right there that does not fall in here. You take mental illness and domestic violence out of here, and you can pretty much treat this entire group the exact same way to resolve it, minus those two. You got to pull the mental illness out because that's where your true rampage killers are going to be. That's not going to happen at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night at a park downtown where people are slinging dope. That's just not where a true rampage killing takes place. So your mental illness and domestic violence will not be in that category because, again, it does not happen at that time and at that place that all these other ones are happening. Child abuse, neglect, there again, I guess we ought to pull that one out too. That's more, I consider that to be more into the probably mental illness too, but domestic violence, of course, and then other and unknown, who knows what those might be. We can ignore problems in order to make a certain group feel good about themselves, and that includes politicians. We can ignore these problems if you want to pretend like you're doing a good job. These people are complaining that somebody else is the reason why I can't do a good job. Think about how stupid that is. Your job, if you're hired on, okay, my job is to fix the, quote, gun violence in Washington, D.C. The moment I get in there and I want to be quiet about it because I don't want to talk about any of these numbers because it might offend somebody and somebody's going to lose votes and not get put back in office and reelected. So I bury my head in the sand, and then when it comes up time for an evaluation, I blame everybody else. I start pointing fingers at everybody else. I wonder if anybody ever asked these people, when you told me and you took this job and you told me you could fix all this, how come you didn't already know this? Because I know this, and I live in Louisiana. This is not hard data to find. These people are ignoring this problem, and they are part of the problem because they don't attempt to try to fix any of this. I want to be very, very clear. A predictable problem is a preventable problem. In other words, if you know what the problem is, you know where it's going to happen at. You know who the people are. 500 people they've identified are committing all these crimes. So you know where, you know who, you know what time. They know all these things. They have all this data. Yet these crimes and these murders continue to happen. You tell me if they're trying to fix that. An unpredictable problem is the one that's hard to fix. That's the one that's not preventable. When you have a true rampage killer out there that just snaps and he goes into a mall, a school, a church, and just indiscriminately shoots strangers that he doesn't know. Not gang members, not people he's got beef with, just people. Because they want to kill as many people as possible. You are stupid and disingenuous if you think you can prevent all those the same way. Those are unpredictable, therefore they're very hard to prevent. They just are. You don't know where they're going to happen. You don't know what time. You don't know the person because it's all kinds of different demographics. Let me be real clear about this. Every time there is a mass shooting and there's a white male involved, you have all these people come out of the woodwork and say that, oh, there we go again, white males. White males are the ones killing everybody. White males are the ones involved in all these mass shootings. You guys better watch out because if the far left wackos and the gun control wackos and the media continue to group every single gang-related shooting and conflict-related shooting into the mass shooting category, you guys, by the end of the summer, will have 50 times more mass shooters attributed to the ones that are committing all these crimes rather than the old mean white male, the one you can't wait to talk about. So watch what you're doing here, because you're going to create a monster that you don't want to be created. Because as sooner or later, it's going to start pointing back at people that are going to hurt your feelings when it points back at. You people need to be honest about this and separate this crap so you can not only solve the problem, but truly and effectively identify it.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.